Our next witness is Mr. Paul Butler, is the Albert Brick Professor at Georgetown University Law Center, where he specializes in criminal law and race relations. Professor Butler is also the author of the book, Let's Get Free, A Hip-Hop Theory of Justice and Chokehold, Policing of Black Men. Mr. Butler received his JD from Harvard Law School and his BA from Yale University. Mr. Butler, you may begin.
Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Jordan, honorable members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify. Mr. Floyd and Ms. Underwood Jacobs, I'm so sorry for your loss. May the memory of your brothers, the memory of the other martyrs, be a blessing to the people all over the country, all over the world who are rising up in what Martin Luther King called the beautiful struggle for equal justice. There has never, not for 1 minute in American history, been peace between black people and the police. And nothing since slavery has sparked the level of outrage among African Americans as when they feel under violent attack by the police. Black people have endured Jim Crow segregation, being shut out of Social Security and the GI Bill, massive resistance to school desegregation, nonstop efforts to prevent us from voting, and poison water. But the rare times black people have set aside traditional civil rights strategies and instead have risen in the streets, destroyed property, and resisted symbols of the state has been because of something that the police have done. Watts in '65, Newark in '67, Miami 1980, LA 1992, Ferguson 2015, Baltimore 2016, Minneapolis in 2020. All of those cities went up in flames because the police killed another black man. Unlawful violence is never acceptable, either as a misguided approach of a few or as an abuse of the power and trust we place in law enforcement officers. The main problem is not bad apple cops. Officers have difficult jobs and many serve with honor and valor. Still, almost every objective investigation of a police department finds that police, as policy, treat African Americans with contempt. The police kill, wound, pepper spray, beat up, detain, frisk, handcuffs, and use dogs against black people in circumstances in which they do not do the same to white people. When armed agents of the state are harming American citizens in our name, we the people must ask why. In the past 2 weeks, we've seen acts of grace and bravery by police officers. Cops in New York took a knee. In Houston, Chief Acevedo arranged for an honor guard to accompany Mr. Floyd's body when he came home. Unfortunately, we have also witnessed these past 2 weeks police officers commit deplorable acts of violence against the citizens they've sworn to serve and protect. In New York, officers drove 2 large police vehicles into a crowd of protesters. In Atlanta, officers broke the window of a car, dragged out 2 college students, and shot them with a stun gun. In Buffalo, a police officer knocked a 75-year-old man to the ground, but what happened next was just as bad. When 2 officers were disciplined for that criminal conduct, 57 other officers quit the squad in protest. President Obama's task force on policing decried the warrior mentality present among too many law enforcement officers. In Buffalo, the nation saw warriors on steroids. African American and Hispanic people disproportionately bear the cost. Blacks are about 20% of the population of Minneapolis, but 60% of the people who cops use violence against. The result is that there are more black people in the criminal legal system today than there were slaves in 1850. When I mentioned to a young man I mentor that if he attended protests, he should wear a mask, he said he certainly would try. But he wanted me to know that as a young black man, he has a greater risk of dying from police violence than from the coronavirus. According to the National Academy of Science, 1 in 1,000 African American men and boys will be killed by the police. What African Americans need to realize equal justice under the law is for selective enforcement and police brutality to end. We need the police to stop killing us, to stop beating us up, to stop arresting us in situations in which they would not do those things to white people. The Justice in Policing Act is a common sense reform. Among other things, it requires cops to be trained on understanding racial bias. In Minneapolis, as 3 officers crushed the life out of Mr. Floyd, and another served as a lookout, somebody in the crowd said to the cops, "He's human, bro." But these 4 officers did not treat Mr. Floyd like a human being. Too often, police work seems to enforce the dehumanization of people of color. Understanding the history and reality of racism in the United States will make our men and women in blue more effective officers. In the end, this hearing is about the legitimacy and sustainability of our democracy. No justice, no peace is not a threat. It is simply a description of how the world works. The multiracial, multi-generational demonstrations that have risen up all over the United States reflect the wonderful diversity of our great nation and the potential of ordinary citizens to make our country live up to its highest ideals. The Justice and Policing Act of 2020 heralds the urgency of transformation and the promise for all Americans of equal justice under the law.